Hey, welcome back. I just want to cover in this episode the outcome of the independent presidential candidate, RFK Jr. He made a rather, what I felt, an impactful speech at the Bitcoin Nashville conference. So I just want to summarize what were the key takeaways from his speech and what would this mean for Bitcoin moving forward, for at least for the rest of this presidential election into the second half of the year. Okay, well, at the conference, it was I felt in short was very emotional and a true ready conviction. I mean, he made some initial declarations to say that if he were president on day one, he'll make the next series of actions. That if he were president on day one, he will sign an executive order directing the Department of Justice and US Marshals to transfer the 250,000 Bitcoin held by the US government to the US Treasury to be held as a strategic asset. This was always a hint or a rumor that this is going to be a pivotal point of debate in this conference, particularly by the political leaders. So it was no surprise at all that RFK Jr. has preempted President Trump talk about this. He went on to say that if he were president, another day one action he would take would be to sign another executive order to purchase 550 bitcoins daily until the US have built a reserve of at least 4 million bitcoins as a position of dominance so that no country can actually reach at that level. Now, this will be huge repercussion, let alone on the scarcity of the bitcoins left in the network to be purchased and acquired by the buyers, but what would the impact would be in terms of price, right? You know, it's only going to be ever 21 million bitcoins. If US government makes this pledge and puts it into action, well, it's going to evaporate what's left of bitcoins out there, and the only way it can truly achieve this is to actually buy the bitcoins by the more resistant hardcore Bitcoin hodlers, right, at a premium, which would mean the price was going to shoot off the roof in no time at all. With these two declarations, he went on to say it will make US to reach the same proportion as the 90% gold reserves that it currently has. He went on to say that he would sign another executive order directing the IRS, which is like the US tax authority in the country, to issue public guidelines that will make all transactions between Bitcoin and the US dollar as unreportable transactions. Now, this actually lit up euphoria at the conference amongst the Bitcoin holders out there. If this, again, this is, I just really can't say enough. It's like a knock-on effect, one after the other. It was just, it was as if you were walking up the staircase into heaven. It's just fantastic. He also went on to say that, and this is where he actually brought down to earth in terms of his own personal belief with what large Bitcoin community represented, and that Bitcoin is the technology representing freedom, optimism, independence, democracy, and transparency. It is certainly the currency for hope. It is the perfect currency. And more importantly, he went on to say it is truly decentralized and democratic. And then he talked about the case study of what's going on in Canada, one of the leading countries in the Western world, you know, a great advocate of democracy and personal freedom, to suddenly see that, you know, they themselves can close people's accounts. It orange pilled the RFK Jr. candidate into the idea of Bitcoin. He then went on to say that the fight to right to self-custody of Bitcoins and also allowing nodes to be run out of people's homes. He went on to say that how we should now turn the rhetoric into action. So he made a bunch of these proposals and statements, and that if he were elected, that, you know, he wants to put this, as much of this, into action. And then he went to say that the US election is going to be really heated up. He's not going to be the only candidate talking about Bitcoin in this election. Obviously, Trump is there. But the point that he's made as an advantage over President Trump candidacy is he has actually done the work well before President Trump, right? He has certainly done his own research, years and years, on the potential of Bitcoin, certainly making Bitcoin or bringing the hard asset to back the US obligation. His plans on strengthening the US dollar, you know, lowest interest rate, and neutralize that, you know, humongous $34 trillion debt by backing US Treasury bills and notes and bonds with hard assets, being precious metals and Bitcoin as the hard assets backing the US Treasury bill. So that's enlightening to hear. and also Bitcoin as a strategic reserve in US Treasury. Bitcoin can protect US against potential cyber attacks. It is a cyber defense weapon. He's incorporated the cyber defense element into the Bitcoin narrative, which was interesting to hear, right? He went on to say, just to add some credibility regarding his stance on Bitcoin, his candidacy. He's been serving as 40 years as an environmental champion, and the last 10 years in a green tech venture capitalist, where he's actually been involved in developing some wind and solar projects. He went to say that Bitcoin miners can play a key partner in utilizing the cheapest energy. Example he made was methane as a waste energy from landfills. Instead of throwing it away into the atmosphere, well, Bitcoin miners can tap into that and uniquely harness it as yet another energy resource. It certainly gives that credibility that he knows what he's talking about. He is truly an environmentalist. He can see Bitcoin mining as an ideal partner for renewable and variable power projects such as wind and solar. He has experience in energy product finance, so when he can easily position Bitcoin miners as a reliable profit center for renewable energy projects, for intermittent energy generation, in order to get the financing, which is ideal partner for these kind of projects. So interesting. He went on to say his plans to defund the military industry, which I would see that as a humongous obstacle. A lot of mention about direct ownership of Bitcoin, making it tax-free, so actually capital gains tax-free. To ever decide to sell the Bitcoins back into the US dollar, not only will it be non-reportable transactions to the IRS, he will plan to make it not subject to capital gains taxation. This is huge, right? If this is true, it would certainly make US one of the most highly attractive go-to countries to move out to, particularly where, as we all know, that Bitcoin is going to appreciate tremendously into the long term, which is why I always keep advocating to hold on to your Bitcoins, to dollar cost average, euro cost average, pound cost average, yen cost average, as much as they're able to during the course of time. He went on to say an interesting point about the asset managers that owning Bitcoin, but not Bitcoin ETF, which is a security and subject to capital gains. I think there's an important distinction to make. The Bitcoin ETFs are subject to capital gains if you ever decide to relinquish your Bitcoin holdings into US or any fiat currency. Whereas having direct ownership of your Bitcoins, he has pledged that not only will it be non-reportable transaction from Bitcoin to US in the eyes of IRS, it'll also be not subjected to capital gains, which is an important distinguishing factor. RFK Jr. has that leading edge, I guess, over Trump in terms of experience and his own personal convictions about the ideals of Bitcoin, the potential of Bitcoin, and these are the sort of pledges and actions that he's quite keen to put into action, the majority of which can be done day one if he were elected US president over President Trump. So this is going to be a really heated week at the conference. It was always anticipated that it's going to be a heated debate, at least from the political landscape. If he himself, RFK, made these kind of statements, heaven forbid what President Trump, how he's going to respond back to that. The citizens have to go deep into their hearts to decide, is it just a rhetoric talk on the eyes of Trump, or would they trust more on RFK given his experience and his much longer standing conviction and homework and research he's done on Bitcoin, rather than Trump, who's only just been in it in a matter of weeks and maybe a few months leading up to the US election. I guess it would just be a question for the American citizens to make their own decision as to which would win, right? But certainly the repercussion of Bitcoin is going to be overwhelmingly positive, and certainly by the end of this year, it's going to be interesting where it will end up in terms of price. But leaving the price factor alone, Bitcoin is just, whatever happens from this election is going to be so entrenched in our own day-to-day lives. It's virtually impossible to now do a U-turn. I can't see that happening at all, because if the leaders from the political arena are truly passionate or becoming increasingly more passionate on the ideals and the potential that Bitcoin can offer, then it's really difficult. So going to be watching over how President Trump will be responding later today. It's Saturday, July 27th. He's expected to make a speech later today. Let's see how he responds to that. But you need to dollar cost average, euro cost average, pound cost average, yen cost average as much as you can into Bitcoin, because the ripple effect out of this conference, as well as the other points I made in my earlier videos, is it's going to be a completely parabolic bull run for Bitcoin. So let's remain strong. Let's remain committed. We are believers that this is the right thing to do. It's truly the only asset that we have to safeguard our wealth. Incidentally, if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to hit the like button. And if you haven't done so, please subscribe to my channel, as I regularly post some interesting videos that could be of interest to you investors out there. So until next time.